This is When You Were Everything. Chapter Empty Threats, pages 144 to 148. Empty Threats. So, it was you! Sloane stormed up to my locker on Monday, right before homeroom. I had no idea what she was talking about, or why she was even talking to me at all. She had barely ever spoken to me directly since the day we'd met. Hi? I said. What are you talking about? Sloane looked behind her and stepped a little closer to me. Layla just told me that she told you to lock the door at my party, and you didn't. That you were the one who let him in, Sloane whispered. She was standing so close to me that when she said the word party, she spit on my face a little. I reached up to wipe it away. Oh, I said. Sloane crossed her arms. Her cheeks had gone ruddier or redder than they usually were under her freckles, so I could tell she was really mad. Are you stupid? Were you really so wasted after one drink that you couldn't even figure out a lock? There was danger in the way she was looking at me, a little too much intensity for me to brush her off. Sloane, I said seriously, look, I'm really sorry, but if you didn't want him there, why didn't you just kick him out? She didn't look away from me, and her pear green eyes felt almost sharp. I took a step back from her and hooked my thumbs under the straps of my backpack. I tried to look around her to see if Layla was at her locker, but Sloane stepped into my line of sight. Are you really that dumb? She said. She smirked and looked evil as hell. You know what? You must be. Can't even lock a door. The words landed like a punch. I was so shocked that I didn't say anything back right away. I stared at Sloane, and she stared right back at me. She looked fierce, like a bird of prey or a big cat. Vicious. This isn't over, she said. I felt my mouth drop open, but before I found my voice, Sloane stormed away from me. I stood there for a long time, stunned at her reaction. I knew I was officially on Sloane Sorensen's bad list, and I felt terrified, embarrassed, and so mad I could barely stand it. Before, I'd feel a little guilty about letting Todd in, but now I didn't at all. Forget her. Her drama wasn't my fault. I pulled out my phone. I speed-walked to the closest bathroom, and my heart was pounding as I typed out a message to Layla. I couldn't believe she'd throw me under the bus, and I needed to know what really happened. I stayed huddled in the stall until I was almost late to class, waiting for her to text back, but she never did. And when I got to homeroom, she wasn't even there. I was on edge for the rest of the morning, just waiting for Sloane to retaliate. I had been bullied in middle school, but people calling me weirdo or nerd or freckle freak hadn't prepared me for the vitriol or anger I'd heard in Sloane's voice. And to make matters worse, I still couldn't find Layla, who had been my protector back then, whom I urgently needed to speak to now. I'd been looking forward to lunch, knowing I'd see Layla there despite our differing schedules. But when I walked into the cafeteria, our table was empty. I looked around, thinking maybe she got held up after class, or thinking, somehow for the first time, that maybe she was homesick today. But then I saw her. She was sitting with Sloane and Melody, Cadence and Sage and Valeria. And I was so shaken that I almost walked right up to her to demand to know what the heck was going on. But Sloane was there, and I wasn't ready to face her again. So I hid. I found an empty table in a far corner of the cafeteria, and I sat down, all alone. I didn't eat. I typed out an angry series of texts to Layla. Then I watched her. She pulled out her phone and looked at it. She glanced around, but since I wasn't at our normal table, she had no idea where to find me. Then Sloane said something to her. I watched Layla shake her head and slip her phone back into her pocket without texting me back. And the hurt of seeing her ignore me in real time was worse than Sloane calling me a name. It was like a hot blade through the center of me, sharp and piercing. I spotted Layla at her locker with Sloane and a few of the other chorus girls right after lunch. I hung back until they broke away from her, and it felt strange that I had to be strategic about approaching and talking to my own best friend. I didn't know when this change happened, but maybe it had been happening for a while, in tiny shifts that were too small to notice. Layla was humming as I approached her. Her back was to me, so all I could see was her sleek black hair and hunched shoulders. I didn't tap her to get her attention. I just leaned against the locker beside hers and said, "Did you hear about what Sloane said to me this morning?" Layla closed her locker and turned to face me. She acted cool, like she hadn't been ignoring me all morning. "I wanted to talk to you about that later," I scoffed. "Layla, are you kidding? You told her I was the person at the door? The way she was freaking out, it's like she thinks I did it on purpose or something." Layla threw her bag over her shoulder. She crossed her arms. "I didn't think she'd flip out on you, okay? And I just said it in passing, that I'd asked you to lock the door. I didn't think she'd blame you for him showing up in the first place." "Well, she clearly does," I said, and my voice caught in my throat. The truth was, I was more hurt by how Layla was breaking her promises lately, and the way she'd ignored me all day, than I was by Sloane's cruelty. I could feel us getting away from what I really wanted to ask her. Did she see what was happening to us? Did she know why she was choosing these new friends over me again and again? "But, Layla," I said, hating how pathetic I sounded, "what are you doing sitting with them instead of me at lunch? Not texting me back all morning?" "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just that Sloane's going through a tough time, okay? She really needs me right now." But what about me, is what I thought. What about WYWE, you over everyone? What makes Sloane more important than us? "She basically threatened me," I said, and I immediately felt ridiculous saying it out loud, even though it was true. Layla turned back to her locker. "Don't be so dramatic. She's just mad right now. She'll get over it. Can we talk about it more tonight? I can come over." She hadn't answered my question about sitting with them instead of me at lunch. She hadn't given me an answer about why she hadn't texted me back, and my throat was constricting or getting tight to hold back tears. It was getting harder and harder to swallow. I felt the tiny betrayals filling me up like poison, and I needed Layla to reassure me, to act like the best friend she was supposed to be. But she didn't, and the longer we stood there, the clearer it became that Layla wasn't coming to my rescue this time. I coughed to clear my throat, and when I started talking again, I sounded almost normal. "I'm not sure. I have a lot of homework." And she just nodded like this was okay. She nodded like everything was perfectly fine. "Let me know, okay?" she said. Then she closed her locker and walked away, leaving me behind.